Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. In this video, to bring you a closer look at the bomber number LB4310-400-638 4x4 single acting spring hinge full mortise residential weight lube bearing steel base satin brass blackened 638 finish. That's what you're seeing there. Satin brass blackened satin brass. Really nice, attractive finish. Lacquer is on, would be applied to a 638 finish. Okay, so let's dissect that part number properly. First of all, the LB stands for a lube bearing, which is a concealed, maintenance-free sort of bearing construction from bomber. The 4310 is a reference to the fact that it's square corner and the location of the screw holes. Okay, we'll talk more about that in a moment. The -400 means that this hinge is 4 inches tall and 4 inches wide. And the height is first on a hinge like this. So you'd call it 4 inch tall, 4 inch wide. And the 638, that means that it is a couple of things. Blackened satin brass, and it means that it's steel based as well. Okay. Now, regarding those hinge screw holes, there's a link below this video to the template, and that shows everything important dimensionally about the location of these screw holes. So you'll want to, before you order this, confirm that that's what you're working with. This is called an ANSI pattern, standard template pattern, but you want to be sure, because you're dealing with a residential door, that this matches exactly what you have, and you can refer to that template to make sure that the vertical or the locations of the screw holes, both vertically and horizontally, match what you need to accomplish. It's a spring hinge is what this is. Also below this video is a guide to how many spring hinges to use. If your door is 85 pounds, 2 spring hinges is what's recommended, and then a typical butt hinge. If you get up to 110 pounds, then 3 spring hinges are what they recommend. You can mix and match this, because the axis of pivoting is compliant with standard 4x4 hinges. Okay, that's a common question. I'm a fan of all spring hinges whenever you can, because you'll find that you've got greater success over an opening when you are using spring hinges if you've got more of them rather than less. So if you're not sure how many to go with, I say opt for the greater quantity, not because of the obvious reason, but because of the reason that you'll find greater success over both the door closing and then more critically it latching. And if it's a fire rated door, like a garage, home attached garage door between those two spaces, it will probably be fire rated. And technically the door needs to be self-closing as a requirement of code, but you'll also want it to be closed in the event of an actual emergency. Now, my logic is this. A spring, okay, as it gets to the point where almost all of the stored energy is released, meaning the last few degrees of the closing cycle, there's not enough torque, let's say, left to get the job done necessarily if you've set the door up with an underpowered quantity of springs. I liken it to a tugboat. They don't go very fast, but they can pull a lot of weight. And my analogy is this. When you've got multiple spring hinges on a door, you can set the tension so that the load is shared equally among all of the spring hinges with the desired effect that at the very closing cycle, you've got enough stored energy to get the door latched. Because keep in mind, the door has got to overcome all that air pressure, air resistance. It's got to get the door itself moving. Sometimes you've got to set the tension so high on the springs that you get the door actually moving very fast, just so that it has enough inertia to get all the way closed. That's really not an advisable way to go about doing it. You want the door to be as controlled as possible, even though with a spring you don't get control necessarily. But you want to have enough stored energy such that the door is not slamming, that the door is actually closing, but most importantly, it's latching. The door's got to encounter all that wind, the weight of the door. It's got to encounter the friction of the latch bolt hitting the strike plate, so you'll want to make sure you've got enough happening there. I say opt for the higher end. You can always add more down the road as well, should you find that you need to. So this is indeed a spring hinge, and how that works is the following. This hinge includes a tension rod, which I just removed from the package. Just a black steel rod, okay, tiny little thing. Then it's going to get a tension pin, and that's that silver pin that you see there. Now, the way that this works is, the tension collar is always installed so that it's in the upward position, and that can work for either a right-hand door, a left-hand door or a right-hand door. You insert the tension rod in the tension collar, and the key is that you always turn the tension collar clockwise. There we go. So when the tension collar is up, you'll turn it clockwise, and as you do so, you reveal additional holes, and it's into one of those additional holes, one of those new holes that you insert the tension pin into. 3 holes is about the quantity of adjustment recommended from Bomber. You don't want to overstress the hinge and break it because it's not a repairable or a serviceable sort of item. So what you'll do is, after you get the door hung, you'll give your hinge a little bit of tension, and then you'll begin to test it. Start with the installation with the top hinge, with the top hinge being a spring hinge for sure, and work your way down. Is how you want to best do that. There is a link to the instructions below this video. Should you need to refer back to them at a later time, they'll likely come printed on the box. If your hinges come in a box, they'll likely come printed on the box. The thickness, and this is one thing I didn't say, this is a full mortise hinge. And you can see from the swag on the hinge leaves that when the door is closed, the leaves are intended to be mortised to the edge of the door and frame. And this leaf thickness here is 96 thousandths, which is considered residential. So it's a thinner gauge, meaning it's residential, it's standard. It's residential, which is 96 thousandths is the residential thickness for a leaf. Use of the word standard could mean that it's thicker. It's typical for residential. And that's going to work with, you know, between 85 thousandths and 109 thousandths thick hinges that you're going to be encountering. Available in several different architectural finishes. 638 is a bit less common, but it is a very attractive finish. Okay. Last thing I'd like to point out to you is you see the Bomber logo there. Right above it, it says Made in USA, a fact that Bomber is quite proud of, as am I to represent them. If you have any questions on the Bomber number LB4310-400-638, single acting, spring hinge, or any other Bomber product, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.